We're back, and this episode it's going to have a lot of music into it, and not because we're going to listen to a lot of music, but because I'm going to try to understand if you feel about music the way that I feel about music. And when is the last time you heard a song or you heard something playing and everything else stopped for you? You were in a conversation with people and there is a song that came out somewhere on the radio and made all of you stop and listen. When is the last time that happened? Think about it. You were at dinner with friends, and a song comes out and all of you look into each other and someone will say, "Hey, wait a second. Turn it up." And you did. And that feeling and that the whole question, took me back in time again, because somehow I remember that we used to listen to music in a completely different way than we are doing today. We were really paying attention, and that's because it wasn't like today. We didn't have all these libraries full of music that we can just listen continuously. Or if we had a favorite song, today if we do, we can play it a million times during the same day until we really get sick of it. But back then it wasn't like this, because if it was a song that sometimes you didn't even know who the artist was, you didn't know the name of the song, you just knew how the song goes, and you knew somehow that was your song, that you loved it. And funny, sometimes probably the speaker on the radio will even pronounce completely wrong the name of the artist or the song, and somehow you don't care. You didn't, because you were just waiting for the first notes. You were waiting for that song to happen. You were waiting for that moment to build up. It was an emotion. It was full of feelings. Because I think that back then, when we had to wait for a song, we listened to it differently and much more careful than what we do today. It's, again, I am not going to make this again about how was music listened before and how it was better then than now, because it's not about that. It's just sometimes the feeling when you listen to music, it is so different, and it could just be meaningful because of the way that we are listening to the music. An intro to one song could actually create a moment that could be somehow an incredible part of that day for you, that moment for you, because of the way that that song was written. And that is something that I think that gives music a particular importance, which today, in a way, we kind of lost it. We've lost it. Guys, it's me. I'm Daniel, together with Joey, and this is The Things We Keep. This simple conversation about things we keep and things that are dear to us, and even things that we don't like that we just keeping. We keep them in a way because in a way they just define a bit more us as individuals, and they do tell our stories in a completely particular and very, very private way as well too. Yes, you guessed it right. Today probably I am going to talk about music that it's that one thing that it's been part of my life for so long, and I'm not going to talk about music in the way that you were probably expecting me to do, because I'm not going to talk about instruments. I'm not going to talk about music that I have written or music that my favorite artists have written. I'm just going to talk about feelings. I was talking a few minutes ago about the intro of one song that when you hear it on the radio, it kind of has this kind of power. It transposes you into a different reality, a different dimension. Somehow you're in a different place with a different version of yourself, and you're just listening to those notes in a completely different and unique way. When we were listening to this intro years ago, we didn't know that this is going to happen. Like, I take one song, for example. If I say "In the Air Tonight" by Phil Collins, most of you will think about that amazing intro, the drums intro, where Phil creates an amazing epic moment just with one simple instrument, which were the drums. Not everybody knows that that drum session that became the intro of that amazing cult song of the past years was a mistake. Not everybody knows that, because Phil Collins at the time was recording with Peter Gabriel. He was actually helping the big Peter Gabriel to write and to record Intruder. And at the drum session that he had during that part, somehow a technical mistake made that one of the microphone, they were recording at the Townhouse in London, and there is a talkback microphone, which is basically a microphone that is used in between the center room and the control room and the actual artists themselves, and to talk between themselves. And that microphone was left open. Was an error, was a mistake that people usually get fired for. What happened is that Phil started to play his drums, and they sound super compressed because of that talkback microphone. Was coming up through the engineer, the sound engineer in the room at the Townhouse, heard this very compressed a drum with a lot of reverb on top of it, and he heard it. He knew that was a mistake. He actually knew it was his mistake, but what did he do? Do you think he stopped the whole session? He didn't. He actually let the whole song go on, like the recording was over and everything, and then he called everybody in the room, and he said, "I might get fired for this, but you have to listen to this." And that's how today we benefit from an amazing tool, if you want to call it like that. It's called the gated reverb. We all use it. In the 90s, after this Phil Collins "In the Air Tonight" song that Phil wrote after he finished the Intruder with Peter Gabriel, he used it in all of these songs. The drums became so powerful, and it had this reverb. Like, having reverb on the drums, it was quite impossible until that moment. But from that moment, everybody was using it. So that breakthrough into the music industry was the moment when that microphone, a talkback microphone, was left open in the control room of the Townhouse in London. An error that became a pinpoint of the music scene around the world. And that's why I personally love music, and that's why, because every single time I hear the intro of the Phil Collins "In the Air Tonight," I just close my eyes and I could relive that moment. I can actually see it through my own eyes. And that is beautiful, because you're looking at history and you can actually get a sense of how it was written. And the sound that Phil Collins used in that recording, it became emblematic for the 90s. Everyone was using it. And this is an example of how music changes. And there are moments in music when, there is an idea, there is an episode that changes everything. When I sit down in my studio writing music, I never think about I am going to write today a history file. I am just going to create a moment today that will influence music for the time to come. That is not possible. There's so many of us. There's millions of creators nowadays. Imagine what it would happen if every single one of us will write history. It's impossible. We are all messengers. We are all keeping, and we're all just, we are, keep playing that incredible music all together because it is the soundtrack of whatever our lives are. And that's why we don't always have to write history by creating or writing a song. We just need to be able to see and hear beyond music, because music, when you listen to a song through a very good pair of headphones, you're gonna hear and you're gonna listen to different layers of that song. You're gonna hear things that you never heard before. If you listen to a good song while you're just in the queue at the McDonald's, it's not going to be the same. It can't be. Music plays feelings, and feelings cannot always be felt through your car stereo or while you're jogging or anything. You can't. You need a certain moment, the 24 hours routine that when you're listening to that song will create that feeling for you. But that being said, I've started by talking about Phil Collins and that amazing drum session through In the Air Tonight, but there are so many other sounds that can actually make you appreciate music in a different way. So that was a drum. I'm talking about Phil Collins. Let's talk about a guitar. And there are so many guitarists that I can think about it. Amazing talents like Clapton, Moore. We can have like a whole bunch of list of them. But there is one of them that always made me hear the guitar in a completely different way, and that is Stevie Ray Vaughan. It was his way of playing the guitar. He was not playing the guitar, he was fighting the guitar. I remember the way that he was, twisting his arms around it, the way that it was a show altogether. When he was playing, when Stevie Ray Vaughan was playing, somehow the guitar disappeared. What I'm trying to say is that he had a way of playing that guitar that you cannot place that sound to another image. I would never imagine somewhere else to be able to play the guitar the way Stevie Ray did. And it's not the guitar itself, because he had that the Fender. He was playing the Fender Stratocaster, a very well-known guitar at the moment. Everyone knew that guitar because it was called his number one. He actually referred to his guitar as a number one. But I remember it was not always about that particular guitar in his hands playing. It was the whole thing. It was Stevie Ray doing something to that instrument that only Stevie Ray could. And that is another beautiful thing about music, because a broken sound from a drum session that Phil Collins was recording, a guitar riff or a guitar solo from Stevie Ray Vaughan that can take you back in time and just remember and relive some of the amazing moments. And those are sounds that you can always just they're imprints. Let me give you another example. Lenny Kravitz. Let's take. What should we take? Are You Gonna Go My Way? Great song. Very, very, very new wave rocky. Very, very, very cool. Incredible, sexy Lenny Kravitz. All the video around. Like, great song. But I'll take another song from his discography. And the song, it's called Low. And the only thing that I remember that song is the groove. The groove was given again by drum. By the drums. The drums were played by this very young woman, incredibly good looking. I remember that watching that video most of the time, being young, and your eyes are taken by that beautiful woman playing the drums, J.K. Kaiser, I think that was her name. And most of us at that time will think that the video, Low, by Lenny Kravitz, was created around that woman because she comes up constantly during the video, just to keep us glued to the MTV video and just to be there in the heavy rotation because they were playing it all the time. But it wasn't. Not everybody knows that Jay Kaiser was an amazing jazz player, and she was a drummer, a real one. She was just not pretending. She was not just pretending to be a great drummer. She actually was. And the beautiful thing about music now, if you're thinking about it, it's that we had back in the 90s the possibility to hear music, to live through it, and to actually get to know some stories that were basically amazing. Like, for example, the story behind Low by Lenny Kravitz. Not everybody knows that Michael Jackson was involved in that song. You didn't know. Yeah, Lenny and Michael, while before the song came out, I think it was about 2 years before, they were in the studio recording, and there is actual a vocal chop into Low that belongs to Michael Jackson. A lot of speculations at the time were just like, oh no, like, look, this sounds like Michael. No, it was Michael. Even Lenny came out years after, and he actually said, like, I gave you the possibility for all these years to wonder, and you did. Was that a cloned voice? Was that? No, it was Michael. And I chose having it in this song because of the respect that I have for the man himself and the artist himself, you know. These collaborations, they were beautiful to see, because music was colliding together. Lenny Kravitz's style had nothing to do with Michael Jackson, but somehow they find a way to put it into one song, and every single layer, every single, like, the rock and the pop, they kind of like live together through that one song that incredibly sexy drummer was grooving. Low by Lenny Kravitz. Yes, I will always say the music is absolutely beautiful, because you don't always, you cannot take it for granted. I mean, when you listen to a song, it's not that you always know that something is actually happening or not, or the fact is that you can go back in time by listening to it. Let's play a little game. If I will ask you to remember something about one particular moment in time, And let's take 1 year. 1990. It's simple. 1990. What were you doing? What were you doing at that moment in time? I bet you don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I vaguely know that I was going to school probably. I don't remember exactly what I was doing. I don't remember exactly who I was with. But I can for sure recognize a sound that belongs to that particular moment in time. I was watching MTV, and very strange, like incredibly strange, I heard this religious chant, a choir, and I saw this bunch. It was a bunch of monks singing, like in a church. And I was thinking at that very particular moment, what the fuck? I mean, this is MTV. I knew it wasn't a Sunday. I knew it wasn't like it wasn't. It was nothing churchy about it. And somehow underneath, I've started listening and hearing an electronic bed of synthesizers, extraordinary sexy, that they were starting to create an atmosphere that was so enigmatic and vibing around that choir, those monks singing. That was enigma, a breakthrough. I remember the name of the song, Sadness. Such a vibe. Goosebumps altogether when that song came out. And I think that that's when I started to understand what heavy rotation at the radio or the MTV meant. That song was on every hour, sometimes even twice. And it was because the producer of that song, Michael Cretu, he was not a stranger to music. He was married and he was managing the incredible singer. I think she was German. Yeah, she was German for sure. Her name was Sandra, and she was doing all this like 90s pop, like 80s pop, like very commercial, if you want to. And Cretu had this idea of sampling this choir from Munich. It was the choir was the ancient chapel in Munich. He sampled, with no approval whatsoever from anyone, he sampled that choir. He produced that song. He produced that whole album by the Enigma. And that Gregorian chant, together with the electronic fusion that Michael Cretu gave to that project, it became a point break in the music industry. It became an iconic moment. It's when music changed, and it was history. Yes, he wrote history of that moment with that album. And it's incredible. It still fascinates me because when you think about those voices, they belong to an ancient era. He brought them into the today's world, which was the 90s. And today, so many decades after, we're still listening to that music and thinking, oh my God, how and why they actually think about doing this. Just so cool. It sounds amazing. Just everything on that album like the Principles of Last and Mia Culpa. Oh, they're absolutely incredible, incredible pieces of music production. And that's when I realized that music didn't really need to choose. You didn't have to choose either that you like rock or electronic or new wave, or music didn't have to belong to one generation or another. It's just music was not just a song. It really felt like that day when I was listening to that song for the first time on MTV. It felt like somebody opened the door. And when that happens, you realize that there is so much that could happen. A sound that comes from an instrument, a vocal, like there's always something else, and it catches your attention, and it just makes you feel in a completely different way that everybody else did. And this was music from an audio point of view, because what Michael Cretu did, they just took two audio sources and blend them into one amazing project. But music did something even better than that. Music started to work on visuals, and videos started to become a very important part of music in general. To think about Michael Jackson. Oh, every song that I can possibly think about when I'm thinking about Michael. Billie Jean, Smooth Criminal, Who Is It, Thriller. All of them were like little movies. Thriller. If I'm actually thinking about, that song when it came out on MTV, usually when it came out, it was almost 15 minutes long. And you never quit watching it. You've seen it probably thousands of times. What Michael did there is just, I remember the story, the prequel story was that he was watching this horror show in London, and he had this brilliant idea of asking the director of that movie to direct his video. And that's how that 15-minute long new way of seeing music came out. We were not just listening to music. We were watching the costumes, we were watching the dancing, we were watching the glove, we were watching the hair, the cars, the graves. We were just watching everything, because the messages that came out from music were not just the audio, just the song that you could just somehow try to relate to. Now it was a whole bunch of images that started to make a lot of sense. It was a movie. We were watching a movie every single time we were watching one of Michael's songs, videos. And that is just absolutely, I think that is just absolutely amazing, because I think when John Landis, when he directed that video, I don't think he was required specifically to make something 15 minutes long. No. He had the idea, he had a song, and then somehow he created that moment. Absolutely amazing. So music gave us, and it's still giving us a lot of things. It gives us an audio direction. It's starting to give us a lot of visual direction as well too. And somehow we just discovered ourselves that we are not just listening to music. So we're not just turning up the radio and just listening to the song that we like and everything. We were just watching the TV waiting for a favorite song to come. And that's beautiful. You started to like a certain haircut. You started to like a certain pair of shoes that you had no access to. You didn't know what the brand is. You were just watching an idea, and somehow your education while you were growing up was completing a circle, because there was no way that someone, when you were going to school, was going to tell you that, I don't know, there is a certain style into putting your hair back and trying to do something with it, instead of just like living it exactly how nature wanted you to have it in the morning when you woke up. All of these things, us trying to watch all those artists and trying to copy them, trying to copy their dance moves and everything, all of these things, it just makes me understand how great the influence of music was for all of us. And it was everything around us. There was just everything was about music. And now when I hear a Michael song, I don't just hear the song. I don't. I'm watching it. Even so it's not there, I'm still watching it, because I remember the video that sometimes at some point in my life I've seen it, and remember the images that they were just backing up that audio thing, and that was a place, because what music did, music created a lot of ways for us to imagine things. So first, when it was just music, like for example with Phil Collins or Stevie Ray Vaughan or Eric Clapton, we were just imagining through the audio that we were listening to. Then when the visuals came out, we were imagining through the imagination of another person that created that video. Sometimes we got to the point when we were imagining an imaginary place as well too, still through music. Let me give you an example. This is a song that everybody knows, Hotel California by the Eagles. What a song. Wow. Those guitars playing, and every time that song came on, somehow the first thing you thought about it was this hotel in the middle of the night somewhere by the sea with this amazing vibe around it. It was an imaginary place. The Eagles created it when they wrote that song, and generations after that, when we were listening to Hotel California, we're all listening and we're all imagining that fictional place, which is amazing if you're thinking about it, because there is always a story behind everything. Even behind Hotel California, there is a story. Talking about guitars again, there is the outro of the song, which is very long, very long. The outro, it's basically guitar playing. For years and years when I was young, I really thought it was only one guitar playing. And guess what? It wasn't. It wasn't. I remember that I was in a radio station that I was working on at the moment, and we were just with another friend of mine that he was working with me together that night. We had this debate about how that guitar sounded like one guitar, but sounded quite impossible to actually play it because there were so many notes. And we got to understand time after that they were actually two players. They were actually two people playing two different guitars that somehow they sound exactly like one. It was Don Felder and Joe Walsh at the Eagles, right? They were just playing this unique part, distinctive parts together into that one part as the outro of the Hotel California that is just became a cult of those years. And that's beautiful because, again, if I'm listening to that song today, you would just realize how when you will listen to it, you'll just see how you pay attention differently that you used to do. Because I repeat, music somehow through history wanted us to experience music at that moment in time with Hotel California by imagining one place. Sometimes music did it differently. Sometimes music did it by letting us discover a real place. I remember that the first time that I have visited New York, it was through one of Sting's songs, An Englishman in New York, which right away, if you're thinking about Sting, music, New York, Englishman in New York, quite made sense. What I didn't know at the time, it was a story inside of the story. Because that Englishman in New York, it was the story of a very old gentleman. It was an English actor, quite famous at the moment, Quentin Crisp, which at the age of 70, maybe 71 years old, he decided to move to New York. So Sting wrote that song around that story. Funny, isn't it? Because that song itself had so many influences on. It was a bit pop, Sting. It was a bit reggae. It was a bit jazz. And at some point, I remember even now that there's that saxophone that maybe the only instrument that could just glue all of these ideas of music together and make it feel kind of like New York was Branford Marsalis with his saxophone. Branford had a way of playing on that track that basically you didn't have to know that it was New York. You felt it. It was New York. What not everybody knows is that Marsalis was playing God Save the Queen. So An Englishman in New York, Marsalis playing the saxophone, an incredible instrument, played to bring the atmosphere of New York into a pop song that had a reggae groove to it. And he did play God Save the Queen, but because he was a genius, he actually played it in a minor key, and everything changed. That song, every time you listen to An Englishman in New York by Sting, you don't know what to listen to. The guitar riff, the reggae. It's kind of like the waves are breaking into the shores, even so we're not at the sea. Pop culture. That saxophone that brings all of the midnight New York vibe to it. Isn't music beautiful? It's absolutely amazing because we talked about imaginary places the music brought us to, which was the Hotel California. Those pin moments when music, pinpoint moments when music became something that we were not used to, which was Enigma with Sadness. It was these places that we used to know, we've seen them in the movies every day, like New York, that Sting somehow brought a different vibe to them. And music has this way of creating these moments that we keep with us over the years. We definitely keep with us. I guarantee you there is a song that you keep inside of you right now that it's telling you stories, and it's telling it in a way that you were not thinking back in time that song will do that for you. You see, if it will be to take one band, or an artist that for all these years did something for me, probably for me will be, most probably for me will be the Depeche Mode. I can't imagine any part of my life and any segment of what I did without having a bit of Depeche Mode in it. And I didn't know it back then. I didn't know that Depeche Mode will be such an important soundtrack of my life. Enjoy the Silence. Dave Gahan's voice on that track. Oh, we can talk about production, we can talk about arrangement, we can talk about like skills, we can talk about everything. We can talk about the vibe, we can talk about like message of the actual song. But if it is to be honest, I don't think that we understand music right away when we hear it. I really don't think that when I was into my 20s, I knew what Enjoy the Silence was. Funny, isn't it? Enjoy the Silence. You get to understand that in your mid-40s. It's not for granted. You can't give it for granted. You can't say when you're 18 or 19, oh my God, Enjoy the Silence. Deep. Wasn't. It was just a cool song. A very, very good song. The story behind the story is that when Martin Gore wrote that song, he basically wrote that song as a ballad. Soft for pussies. Now, I wouldn't say that, but it was soft. It was really soft. What actually happened, it's Wilder got that song, listened to it, and said, this song has something in it that can become something really, really good. He changed the whole arrangement of the song. He brought up the up bit and he just made it a bit more electronic, if you want to. He gave Enjoy the Silence the sound that we know it now for all of those decades. That became the iconic sound of the 90s, if you want to. And he did that with a song that was written as a very soft ballad. And not because that song, I really want to underline this, I don't think that the way that Martin wrote that song was wrong. No. We saw Martin over the years singing and performing all these amazing songs in his very, very particular way of doing that. If I hear Martin Gore singing, the only thing I can imagine is him with his wings, because he feels angelic when he plays. But then you hear Dave's voice, and then you are right away taken into the underworld. There is a way that Gahan writes and sings his feelings that I don't think we have many singers that do that. After all this time, for me it's very hard to find someone that does exactly the same. I thought back in time the Bono from the U2 was getting a little bit closer, but over the time I just understood that he was very far away from Dave. And something that fascinated me at that moment and in the years that they followed is that music had a very incredible way of becoming human. So now if I'm listening to the Enjoy the Silence, if I'm listening to Dave Gahan and that song, I really understand the message differently. It touches me bad. It touches me in such a way that it just brings tears, and I'm just realizing that I'm listening to the same song over and over and over again, but in a completely different way. It's the way that music tells you that your life is beautiful, mostly because of the soundtrack. And you don't have to be into the Depeche Mode. You don't have to like blues or rock and roll, or you don't have to be a metalist. No, music in general, whatever you choose to be your music, whatever you choose to be your soundtrack, is your companion that will never let you down. Because music is one thing that it will never betray you. Even so, today we all freely say the music is bad. It all sounds the same. Oh my God. It's no, it doesn't. If it does, it's because you're not listening carefully. And you should. Because if there is a point break in time when Enigma and Michael Cretu at that point changed the history of music. If there is a point in time when Michael Jackson with his videos he just changed the idea of listening to music. There is always, you need to be prepared, because sooner or later someone else or something else will happen, and then music will shift again from one thing we know to another thing that we don't. And if I think about it, like Enjoy the Silence again, and if I'm thinking about the moment when Alan Wilder told Martin Gore, let me use this song that you wrote and let me do something with it. Think about if Martin Gore would say no. Why would you let someone else, another musician, do something with the piece that you have created? I did that mistake. A lot of people did that mistake. I had someone a few years back that asked me for one of my songs to use it and to do it in a different way. And I said, no, I wrote it. I want to keep it. Was it a good decision? I will never know. But think about Martin and Alan at that moment in time, when they had to decide one to take the other one's creation to do something with it. And Wilder did something with Gore's Enjoy the Silence that became an amazing, iconic musical moment in the music history. And we need to understand that we all see art differently. If you are a painter, it's impossible to watch a canvas in the same way that another painter is doing. I don't think that as a footballer you can choose one way to continue an action that another footballer will do exactly the same thing. What I'm trying to say is that people will at some point do something that will absolutely have an imprint, like a fingerprint, like I'm going to do that in my way, and that's going to just make it better or not, but it's just going to make it differently. And then if we're talking about music and the way that music changed us or changed the way that we, all of these shifting and in between generations and everything. I can't talk about music without referring to the hip hop. The hip hop wasn't just a genre, and it wasn't just a style of making music. It was just right up there. At some point, the hip hop it it just stopped being that genre. It just became this way of speaking and dressing and storytelling. It became a lifestyle. I remember when I was listening to Tupac or to Biggie and their music, I was listening to their music differently back then. It was aggressive, it was engaging, a lot of bad words. It was a lot of attitude out there. Although, if I'm listening to the same music today, it sounds different. You don't realize how much of what they were saying was documented. They they were talking about the way that they were living, the things that they were witnessing, what they were afraid of, and basically they were talking about everything that happened around them. And there is another thing about hip hop that I really, really like is that the incredible relationship that hip hop as a genre had with the past. Hip hop never said this was then and this is now, and that is good and this is what. No, hip hop didn't do that. Hip hop had a way of saying, give me that, and let me show you what I can do with it. I was just talking about Tupac, right? Changes. Great song. Absolutely great song. And great story around it and everything. But the real story of the song stays in the fact that that song belongs to a different point in time. That belongs to 1984, if I'm not wrong, when I think it was 1986 to be correct. When Bruce Hornsby, The Way It Is, came out, and it was a great, great song, and Tupac just borrowed that. And he had a very particular and a very personal way of putting his story on top of Bruce Hornsby's song. And it sounded lovely, because today when you listen to The Way It Is by Bruce Hornsby, you will just listen to that vibe, and you will just listening and participating to that song in the way that the 80s will let you. But then when you're listening to Tupac Changes, it will shift into a different story. And Biggie's, what's the name of that song? Juicy. Juicy wasn't Biggie's song, if you want to. It was Biggie's story, but it was Mtume's Juicy Fruit. That was 1983, I think, when it came out. And again, the same thing. Biggie took that sample, made it his, and then laid his story on top of it. So is sampling music bad? No. Look at Moby. They took Angelo Badalamenti's piano composition and put it on Go, which became an absolute pioneer of the 90s in terms of electronic music. And Badalamenti wrote that composition for a TV series, which was the Twin Peaks. So sampling music is not always a bad thing. Yes, you could just ask permission. You could collaborate. You can just shift back in time to someone to refer to the person or the artist that actually created that thing and just borrow from it, ask for it, and ask the permission to create something with it. There's nothing wrong with that. And that doesn't mean, because I heard that a lot of times, that when you do that, you're lacking in imagination and creativity. I don't think that's true. Because when Moby wrote Go, it had nothing to do with the Twin Peaks theme. When Tupac wrote Changes, really had nothing to do with Bruce Hornsby, the way it is, of a few years back. So music remembers, and that is a beautiful thing about music. Music takes something old and it gives it another shape and it gives it another future. Music has this very unfair way of outliving us. It will always do that. It's unfair, I know, but it is the way it is. And the beautiful thing behind all this is that it's a never-ending story. We will always have music to enjoy. And this makes this particular conversation we have today not about music in particular, but it makes it about the things that we inherit, the things that we keep during our lifetimes. What are we actually keeping? What are we actually taking with us while we are living our lives? Music is one of those things. We keep it for a little while, we do, and then we pass it through. That's what our parents did with music. They somehow gave it to us. Then we had it, we enjoyed it, we made it ours, and now we're gonna just pass it through again. And when we have these pieces of music, I remember that back in time, because right now, what the reality of today is that it's easier, obviously, to listen to music. You want to listen to something to a record from 1972, you just simply search for it and you'll find it and you'll play it and you're going to listen to it. Where back in time you didn't have this possibility. You gave music much more value simply because you had no access to it. You had no way to keep that memory unless you remember when we had those cassettes, right? So when at the radio we knew that oh my god, the Depeche Mode Enjoy the Silence will play. I will hit record on my cassette player and I will record the song directly from the radio station. And I remember that we were hoping that the disc jockey will not talk at the radio station over our song. And if that happened, so what? Now we have the announcer that actually speaks about the song that it's ours. So everything had a different meaning, and we used to give so much value to these little things that today we just simply take for granted. And it happens in this way that if you're asking me, when I kept my cassettes, I never thought that, oh God, I'm gonna keep this for the next 40 years. Yeah, because it just happens, and years after you think about it, you look back and you just see that cassette, you see that guitar, you see that photograph, and you just remember about those moments. You remember about the person that you used to be at that moment in time. You remember about who you were with. You remember about the song that he was playing at that moment when you were there doing that thing that you were doing. So your story, most of the time, our stories are defined by moments that are beautifully described by feelings, and those feelings stay in the things that we keep, as simple as it is. We can't, if today if we were talking earlier about the Phil Collins drum intro into In the Air Tonight, if we were talking about a 15-minute old video for one of Michael Jackson's songs, or we were talking about breakthroughs into music productions, or putting a lot of genres together and creating things that they were not supposed to sound good together. We just realize how music has this very particular way of changing form for us to be able to just live a better life. Because I repeat, the soundtrack that we give to our existence in a way defines us. And this podcast, this idea of finding the things that we keep, stays and has somehow behind the idea of keeping the soundtrack of our own lives. It's not just about music. It's about you. It's about who you were, what you have become after just life decided they have to struggle for a little bit. And you will always have the possibility of turning your head around, looking back over your shoulder, and remembering things. There is nothing more beautiful than that. And we should keep these things, because the things that we keep in a way or another, they are telling our stories. Until next time, take care of the things you keep. Cheers. Whoa.